Alright guys, good morning and welcome back to another video. Today, as we continue to work on the RX7, we are going to be working on relocating the battery and upgrading the alternator. So why do we need to do this? The intercooler piping is taking up the space that would usually be used for the stock battery box. I'll show you that right here. Additionally, we are going to be running electric fans, an electric power steering pump. Obviously we want the ignition to be strong. We're running aftermarket coils, and we're going to be adding a stereo system at some point. What that means is that the old 60 to 70 watt alternator that the FC comes with is not going to work. So what I've purchased is a upgraded 3rd gen FD alternator that actually produces 200 amps at peak power. So what that's going to do is allow for all those accessories to have power while the engine's running. It won't drain the battery, and we won't have power dips and voltage drops when we turn on certain things like the power steering pump or the fans click on. So the first thing I want to emphasize is that I've already adapted this pulley to the FD alternator. This is actually the FC's dual pulley, dual belt pulley, and the diameter of the input bolt on this FD alternator is wider than the FC. So I already took this to a machine shop and had them widen that out, and now it fits on there and it clears on the spacer. So I still need to tighten this down with an impact, but now all these dual belt configuration will run this alternator well. So you can't use the pulley that's going to come on it. I will leave a link in the description below for Amazon to pick up this alternator. I think it's a pretty good value. It's like $180. So considering it's brand new and provides 200 amps and for the most part bolts on with a little spacer, I think it's pretty good. Second thing to show you is this pigtail that I purchased. I also purchased this on Amazon, and it's just the stock pigtail, so it'll make for a nice clean install. You don't have to have it. You can just tap in directly to the blades in here with your wiring, but I think it's going to work and look much nicer to use this. So obviously the battery and the alternator are both related because they're part of the car's charging and electrical system, but there's another reason I am doing them both together today in one video for you, and that is because since we're wiring in a higher amperage alternator, we cannot run all the power of that alternator through the stock harness and through the stock fuse box. We have to branch off and put it directly to the battery terminal. So to tie all this together, what we're going to be using is this simple battery post relocation or extender. And it's going to act as a conductivity point that will connect our battery and our charging system. So I'm going to go ahead and mount that in the engine bay and show you how we connect all of our new cabling to this central location. And here we have our post mounted. I had to modify just this side of it where we've run the bolt through just to make sure it cleared, so just dremeled that away, and then the second half, the second mounting point, is zip tied to the actual wiring harness itself. So now we'll make connections at the end of the battery terminals and the new wires we're running to clamp down and bolt on to this post. So here's the part of the wiring harness that has the current battery terminal connection. So the yellow wire stripe is the ground, and this goes to the positive terminal on the battery. Now we're going to take this 2-gauge wire right here that I purchased, and we're going to go ahead and run this as the extra lines headed to the inside of the cab for the battery. Okay, so here we are inside the cab, and we're using a pre-existing hole in the firewall to pass this 2-gauge cable through. This cable is actually welding wire, so it's a very fine assortment of copper wires inside there for great conductivity. So we're going to bring this back along the center console, and it's going to come out into this back storage bin where they sometimes have joke seats back here, or in our case, little storage bins, and that's where we're going to be mounting the battery. Our 2-gauge wire kit also came with these clamp-on ends, so we can make terminated ends with a loop to connect to our post. So we're going to go ahead and use our bench vise to attach those to our loose 2-gauge wire. Okay, and there we have our first battery terminal. So now that we've got our end crimped, we can start routing the positive battery wire right down here to our post. So this bolt hole right here is for the factory seat belts if you have the 2+2 option, but it's still in the chassis. So we tapped it out with a M10 1.5 so that we can get bare metal exposed, and we've got this matching bolt. So now we're going to make a connection with the other part of our 2-gauge wire, welding wire kit, so we can make a battery ground.
Did someone say welding?
Yeah. Also, for all these connections, if I haven't mentioned it yet, we're going to use dielectric grease to preserve the connection over time.
To pervert the connections, got it.
Perfect.
Give her a good touch, she's all safe?
Oh yeah.
Yeet!
Good. Alright, well clearly for a more garage build everything was going far too smoothly. That bolt that we wanted to use to do the chassis ground is not an M10. Funny enough, it's actually an M11, which is impossible to find. Luckily, through the interweb, I was able to find out that some people use a 7/16 by -20 standard bolt, and I just coaxed it in there using some WD-40, and it actually tightens down. So now we can continue with putting that ground back on. Looky there.
That's it!
Now,
we grounded! We grounded, fam!
Now we have a chassis ground.
There, see that? That's how you do it right there. It's good times. Good times.
And there we go. Now we need to crimp down the end of the positive battery cable from the original location. This used to have the positive terminal battery connection on it. Now I've slid one of these connectors from our kit over, and my only solution is to vice grip it down because this is mounted in the engine bay. So I'm just going to progressively clamp it on there, and hopefully we get the good connection we are looking for. So as of right now, I don't have a use to connect this factory ground because we've grounded the battery in the back storage bins inside the cab. But it's a very useful grounding location, and I do have a black terminal like this which could potentially mount up here in the future. And so just for now, I've covered it up with some electrical tape so it's easy to access if we need in the future. And I'm just going to tape it along the wiring harness here, zip tie it in place so that it's nice and tucked out of the way. If we need it for future grounding, we just untape that right there, get us up another post like this, and we'll be in business. And now we get to the more tricky part, which is wiring up the harness that's going to connect the alternator to the ignition system. So, first things first, this is the cut-off stripped piece of the stock harness's wire that carries power from the alternator through the main charging system of the vehicle. Now we're going to be using this in conjunction with our large wire, but the end of it does not fit on this diameter post, and it's slightly too long from the stock location. So I grabbed myself some standard 8-gauge ignition wire, again off Amazon, link in the description below, and it has two ends which will fit on there. These will be useful for strong grounding in the future, anything else I might need. So I got it. There's a eyelet on either end. So we're going to take and splice this into this, which means it's soldering time. Okay, so got this soldered together. It's very difficult to solder thicker gauge wire, but just use lots of flux, and I always go for lead core solder. It's not the best for you, but it works better. So now we connect our large 2 gauge wire, which runs to our relocation post, and we connect our 8 gauge for this stock one to this output post for the FD alternator. Go ahead and tighten that down. Okay, so now we need to wire up the ignition switch and the dash voltage readout, which is going to go to this pigtail here. Now the pigtail makes it easy, easier at least. And I don't have the stock connector on these, and I haven't for years, so it's just wired in with these. So you could do a similar way. You could just wire in with these blade connectors and run it that way. So I'm using this helpful diagram that I found in the RX7 forums, and so basically the white cord, the white wire with the black stripe, goes to the bottom connection on the pigtail, and the black cord with the white stripe goes to the top connection. So I'm going to split these wires, connect them together, and then we should have a nice easy pigtail connection to work with for our alternator setup. Okay, so we got those wires soldered up and shrink wrapped here, so I'm going to wrap those in a bit of Tessa tape just to clean all this up. I have also used some zip ties to keep everything nice and tidy for the other wires we ran. Now all that remains is installing a battery box so we can hold the battery down safely in its new location, and connecting it up, flipping the switch, and seeing if it all works. Those tests are for another day. We're going to have to purchase the battery box and probably custom fabricate something to mount it in there, which will probably be a full other episode. And we still need to put the interior back in, which connects all the electrical systems, so we can test things, and that should be coming up for you soon as well. Remember, like, comment, and subscribe, and check the links in the description if you want to do something like this for yourself. You can see what we purchased from Amazon to get those, and if you click the links, it helps the channel a lot. And we'll see you guys in the next one.